The Empire Strikes Back is widely considered to be one of, if not the best, Star Wars films of all time. Not only that, but people rank it among the top movies of all time. In my continuing series to talk about everything great about Star Wars, here is everything I love about The Empire Strikes Back. I love that George finally got to put the episode number in the opening crawl. He wanted it for the original Star Wars, but Fox said no because they thought it would be too confusing. So now we get episode 5 in the second movie as if that's any less confusing, like the audience somehow missed 3 movies in between. I love Hoth and the continuation of this idea that Star Wars planets can be just one climate, as long as it's an exotic one to most of the world. Obviously, it's not exotic to Norwegians, but I think it's safe to say most people have never been somewhere like that, and back then in the early 80s, even seeing pictures or video of a place like that was probably rare too. Tauntauns are great. I love the noises they make and the jokes they have spawned, but I also love the combination of stop motion and puppetry that brought them to life. Speaking of puppets, you gotta love the Wampa. Echo Base is so cool and such a step up from Base 1 on Yavin 4. It's a full-on set covered in ice and snow instead of just being a big dark hangar room. Han bringing up Jabba the Hutt is a cool connection back to the original film. Before the special edition, it was just a quick reference from Greedo, and now we're seeing that Han still has that debt hanging over his head. The slow build to Jabba in these movies is great, and one of the things that makes the trilogy feel more planned than it actually was. Han mentioning a bounty hunter on Ord Mantell is a good example of what our friends at Force Center podcast would call tip-of-the-iceberg storytelling. Like the Clone Wars and A New Hope, where nobody has to stop and explain what that is, it's an accepted part of Star Wars history. And now we're seeing that Han and Leia and Luke have all shared adventures across the galaxy that we haven't been able to see yet. Watching Leia and Han bicker is always fun, and knowing from books like From a Certain Point of View that the entirety of Echo Base wished they would just get a room already makes it even better. Also, as a kid, I thought Han telling Leia he could arrange a kiss with a Wookiee was the funniest thing. This isn't something I noticed until much later in my fandom, but I love that R2 and 3PO's introduction to the movie is them fighting over who is responsible for melting Leia's living quarters and getting her clothes wet. Teaming Han up with 3PO for so much of this movie was a brilliant decision. Everyone remembers The Empire Strikes Back as the darkest chapter of the trilogy, but it's also maybe the funniest. I loved learning about the additional plans for Wampas in this movie, that there was supposed to be a big attack on the base and the rebels trapped them all in a room and all that. I thought it was fascinating, in the same way that I thought Luke and Biggs' deleted scene from A New Hope was fascinating when I saw pictures of that. Being able to see the aftermath of the attack in the movie, the mess that was made, the injured Tauntaun, it always reminds me of that fascination. Luke hanging in the Wampa cave is such a cool image despite it making very little sense. As in, did the Wampa just stand there holding Luke while he froze? It's Hoth, so it probably didn't take long, but is that really the most logical way to capture and store your food? It's a funny thought, but it also doesn't matter. Star Wars follows the rule of cool above all. It's hilarious to me that you can see the real-world printing on the bottom of Luke's lightsaber. I think it says made in New York or something. Anyway, you're welcome for something you'll never not notice again. Also, I love the expansion of the Force. Right away, Luke can now move objects with his mind. Nobody stops to explain this, it's just a fact the audience is expected to accept. Over 40 years later, and we're still struggling with that concept as a fandom. Gotta love the first time a droid gave the odds of something in Star Wars. 725 to 1, a ratio trivia nerds have had memorized for far too long. But going back to the Force, we get another new thing in the first 15 minutes, Force Ghosts. Granted, that's not as much of a stretch since we heard Obi-Wan's voice after he died in A New Hope. I think it's kinda cool that this could be played off as a vision or mirage due to exhaustion at first, and then we get it confirmed later on. I don't mean to be gross, but I love the Tauntaun guts. It is gross, but in a fun way. If Stranger Things wrote the subtitles for this movie, it would say, "Intestines squelch wetly." Yes to Zev Sineska. Of course I'm gonna love on the pilots, and as a trivia nerd, he makes it so easy to remember which pilot finds Luke and Han because he says his call sign like 8 times. Bacta is cool and it harkens back to technology like hyperspace and holograms. George Lucas has said that he hates when stories stop to explain what things are, especially in a universe where everyone in the story already knows. He liked to simply trust the audience to figure things out using context clues. And I like that you can see the red Bacta in the background of the next scene. The concept art for Bacta showed it to be red, but then apparently the lighting made it look clear during the actual shooting of the scene. More Han and Leia bickering and more laughs in this scene. Everyone gives an A-plus performance with their over-the-top reactions, and Laugh It Up Fuzzball is something else I thought was hysterical as a kid. I think I just like Wookiee humor. Let's ignore the elephant in the room for a second and just say that Luke's reaction to kissing his sister, Leia, is great. It got another big laugh for me the first time I saw it, but of course now every time I'm like, oh Luke, no. General Riken sending Rogues 10 and 11 to Station 38 is a good, sneaky way of getting the 1138 Easter egg into the movie. I love the sound the probe droids make. I don't know why. I've always liked imitating it. I also feel like everyone has a different impression of it. Nobody really agrees on what it's, quote, saying or what it sounds like. What a cool introduction for Darth Vader's new ship, the Super Star Destroyer. Let's show off a fleet of Star Destroyers, which we already know are big. That's one of the first things established in all of Star Wars, is that those big triangle ships are huge. And then we see them absolutely dwarfed by the Executor. And of course, we've got to give it up to John Williams for the Imperial March. It's one of those themes that feels so insanely Star Wars that it's easy to forget it wasn't invented until The Empire Strikes Back. It just feels like it was always there. Inside the ship, let's talk about the Empire for a second. I think this movie has the best Imperial officer characters. They run the gamut from capable to clumsy and stupid, and some are downright sympathetic. The terrified look all of the bridge crew gives to Vader as he simply walks around is perfect. Like, all of them are wondering, are we about to see some poodoo go down? Also, Vader looks so much better than he did in A New Hope, again with the increased budget for this movie. I can't imagine what seeing this in 1980 must have been like. Star Wars was already a huge leap in technology, and then Empire comes along and improves on dang near everything. The blocking of this scene is amazing. I laugh every single time Vader turns around and Veers is right in his face. Kudos to Julian Glover for keeping his cool. Or actually, I wonder if that's a character choice. Every other Imperial seems uncomfortable around Vader except for Veers. Shout out to General Farrell McQuarrie, aka concept artist Ralph McQuarrie, getting his cameo in Star Wars. Han yelling, "Turn it off!" while his ship explodes around him is excellent. I love Luke scratching Chewie like a dog and then getting a big ol' bear hug in return. Vader's meditation chamber is sick. Again, it's not explained, it's just this little privacy chair he sits in as far as we know, and then fans were welcome to speculate on its purpose until some reference book or role-playing source book probably spelled it out. We saw Vader threaten Mahdi with the Force choke in A New Hope, but seeing him follow through on Ozzel is terrifying, and I love Piet's reaction to being promoted to Admiral, and even the audience is like, oh, that poor man. The reveal of the AT-AT is cool, and again, I'm going to talk about the rule of cool, because that's what they're following here. Are giant four-legged walkers really the most logical weapon for an attack like this? Not some sort of hovering tank? Nah, let's make tanks that walk. That's neater. Oh, and what if we have a ship that can fly around them and tie them up? That's neat too. Star Wars goes for what's fun way more often than it goes for what's logical. But more than that, AT-ATs are also very imperial. They're huge and scary, and they're built to inspire fear. But at the end of the day, their foundations are shaky and they can be toppled over. Snowspeeders are cool too. I always thought the idea of having a pilot and a gunner sitting back to back was fun and interesting, and just like AT-ATs are Imperial, Snowspeeders are very rebel. They weren't made for combat, they were made for moving cargo, but it's what they had access to, and so it's what they used. I also love that porta-potty turret. That's all I think I need to say about that. That man is playing Galaga. He thought we wouldn't notice, but we did. I don't know what he's really doing, but he is intense with that little datapad. The Battle of Hoth is excellent and does a lot of things I love about space battles in Star Wars despite being in atmosphere. The casual throwing around of pilot names like Hobby and Jansen. The reappearance of Zev Seneska is good and gives you that, yay, it's that guy moment, and then, oh no, not that guy, when he's shot down shortly after. And of course, the reappearance of Wedge Antilles. You get the sense that there is history between all these pilots, and it hurts to watch them get picked off. But seeing their little victories also feels that much better. Hooray for the harpoon and tow cable and the moment that inspired seemingly hundreds of Star Wars video games. I always laugh at this one rebel guy who yells, "Come on!" when that AT-AT goes down. Come on? To where? We're stuck in the trench, Larry. ATST sighting. I love that they made the walker for this movie and they were like, dang it, we're gonna use it. We don't care if AT-ATs are taking all the spotlight, just throw it in there. Right before destroying the shield generators, Veers' AT-AT blasts one rebel. It's like someone on board had a vendetta against that dude in particular, and I always feel bad for him. Okay, I think I've made Veer's watch sweat enough. Veers is a great character. For as little screen time as he gets, he proves to be a formidable enemy. He beats the rebellion through his tactics. He doesn't have a Death Star, he doesn't have the Force, it's just him versus the rebels and he wins. It's the only Imperial victory of this scale we see in the original trilogy, and it's thanks to this man. No traps or trickery, just Veers. Of course, I love that Veer's watch has one of the AT-AT drivers named after him, that's awesome. And I guess I also love that both drivers' TK numbers use my and Molly's birthdays. That's pretty neat too. If you haven't read From a Certain Point of View The Empire Strikes Back, the Veers story is a must. I'm glad the danger sticker was included in the final cut on the room where the Wampas were trapped. Again, I just love seeing the evidence of things that were left on the cutting room floor. Snowtroopers are so cool. I love that they are designed in such a way that they're clearly Imperial, but again, without explaining anything in the film, audiences just know that they're cold-weather stormtroopers. The Falcon's constant failing in this movie is amazing. Han's quick Fonzie-like bang on the panel to bring it to life is great, and can we start calling Han Hansi? But even cooler is seeing the Falcon in action. In A New Hope, all of the camera moves were revolutionary, yes, but holy cow, seeing it in The Empire Strikes Back is insane. The amount of moving pieces in each shot compared to A New Hope is pretty staggering, and then we get to the asteroid field. Okay, first of all, I have to point out the odds of successfully navigating an asteroid field being approximately 3,720 to 1. I don't think I've ever been to bar Star Wars trivia where that hasn't been asked. I lie awake at night wondering what information my brain no longer has room for because I've memorized all the odds 3PO has spouted out over the years. But more importantly, the moves the Falcon and the TIE fighters make through the asteroid field are so dynamic. It's amazing to watch. It's one of my favorite Star Wars sequences of all time. Even today, 40 years later, I'm amazed by it. I wonder how they went from what we saw in A New Hope, which, believe me, I still think is great, but the jump to this in only 3 years' time is crazy. 5 ships flying close to the camera and away from it, spinning around, all while flying through countless rocks, casting shadows on the rocks, sometimes smashing into the rocks, which brings me to the detail of the little TIE pilot flying out of his cockpit. I get the sense Lucas and ILM were like, hey, Star Wars was great, we know that, but we can do better, and we will do better, and they devised this sequence to blow audiences' minds, and then they knocked it out of the park. And of course, I also need to credit John Williams again for his amazing work. This is a top-tier Star Wars song for me. It might be my favorite one. I can't not sing along with it. I can't not crank the volume up. It's all truly amazing. I love this scene. R2-D2 has used his little periscope so many times at this point, but the first time it appears in the swamps of Dagobah is funny and starts the tradition of giving the little droid more and more tools every single movie. Getting our first look at what's going on underneath Vader's helmet is fantastic, confirming that he is human, but he looks pretty messed up and we don't know why, just teasing out little bits of information. Yoda's introduction is of course amazing, the puppetry is masterful, and I still fully believe it to this day, but I love the kooky old man bit, just making a mess of the camp, whacking R2 with his cane. It's hilarious. Han trying to quietly tell Chewie how to fix the Falcon after 3PO just told him what to do is great. I knew I thought this movie was funny, but I'm still surprised how many notes I'm writing down that are all just jokes I'm laughing at. Speaking of, 3PO fixing the Falcon at the worst time and proudly interrupting Han and Leia's first kiss is wonderful. I love the detail of an asteroid smashing into the bridge of a Star Destroyer and then cutting to a holo call between Imperial officers and seeing that one dude blink out of existence. And nobody bats an eye. They're just like, yep, he's dead, let's move on. Nobody stops to ask if Captain Cannonhouse accidentally muted himself or something. They just don't care. By the way, for a while I loved that that guy didn't have a name, because that's such a rarity in Star Wars, but he was finally named in two From a Certain Point of View The Empire Strikes Back stories by Seth Dickinson and John Jackson Miller. The same way we slowly build to Jabba the Hutt, I love the way this movie helps us slowly build to the full reveal of the Emperor. He gets a mention or two in A New Hope, a brief appearance here, and then we truly get to see him in all his power in the finale. The second scene with Yoda, where he's still messing with Luke, is great, trying to find out his motivations, testing his patience, and Luke failing every test. Mark Hamill's performance against Yoda is phenomenal, and a large part of the reason people are willing to buy this tiny puppet at all. But I love the themes of Luke learning that becoming a Jedi isn't what he expected. Dagobah, Yoda, none of it is what he thought it would be. He craved adventure and excitement, but that's not what being a Jedi is about, and Luke has to learn those lessons in this movie. Unfortunately, he learns them the hard way. I remember clearly asking my dad what Yoda meant when he told Luke he would be afraid, and what he told me has shaped my view of Star Wars ever since. He said that as you grow up, you realize the potential you have in this world for good and evil, and it starts to become scary. That we all have power, and we have to choose wisely how we use it. That is the core of Star Wars for me. We all have power, and how we choose to wield what power we have defines who we are. For the Jedi, that power is the Force. For the Mandalorians, it's their weapons and gear. For politicians, it's their voice in the government. No matter where I am in life, I have remembered the words of Yoda and my father to hopefully use whatever power I have for good. And now let's jump from that to the TIE bombers. Ooh, spaceships, neat. But that's what's so great about Star Wars. It'll hit you in the face with a philosophical lesson you'll carry with you for your entire life, and then in the very next scene you'll get to see a cool new ship design bombing asteroids because it's cool. Inside the asteroid, we get the scene of Han and Leia and Chewie walking around in space without atmosphere. Well, we learn in books and stuff that there is atmosphere inside, but really they're fine because Lucas and Kirshner just didn't care about science. I've brought this up a ton of times before, but Lucas has said that in his world, there is air in space, when he wants it. Kirshner said he considers Star Wars a fantasy and not science fiction specifically because he didn't have to worry about there not being oxygen or gravitational forces in space. To put it plainly, space isn't that deadly in Star Wars, and that's definitely a precedent that remains in the Star Wars universe to this day. And then, of course, the space slug is just a neat creature. I constantly forget that thing was just a puppet, just a man's arm and a giant oven mitt. Every silly thing in this movie is treated so earnestly, and it works so well. I love Yoda's little backpack, but of course I love his speech here as well about the dark side. Anger, fear, and aggression, they're quick to join you in a fight but should be avoided. Once you give in to letting them control your actions, it becomes easier and easier to fall into that habit. Using them may seemingly get you what you want quickly, but it won't last and it isn't sustainable. And you know the good side from the bad when you are calm, when you have control over yourself, your fear, and your anger. And then the dark side cave is so cool and meaningful. Yoda tells Luke he'll take into the cave only what he brings with him. Luke brings his weapons because he is afraid. So he brings in his fear. And what's inside? Darth Vader. And not just Vader, but a vision that builds off of what my dad told me. Luke sees that he has the potential to become Vader. He might be good now, but he can slip and fall just as easily as Vader did. That's what Luke fears and what he brought with him. Also, the whole thing is just kind of trippy and shot in a spooky way. Great sequence. Also, I like that there are just straight up snakes and iguanas on Dagobah. No need to throw on extra legs or eyes or something weird. They're just lizards. The bounty hunters. I love the bounty hunters. I think they were all my most played with action figures, just gathering them all together and making them duke it out. This is such classic Star Wars. Actually, this might be the closest The Empire Strikes Back comes to having a scene like the Cantina in A New Hope or Jabba's Palace in Return of the Jedi. This is where we just get to see a bunch of cool character designs, and most of them only for a few seconds. Boba Fett, of course, sticks around and becomes the fan favorite, but every single one of them has that feeling that there is a story behind them. This shot of the Falcon and the engine flaring out behind it is sick. Captain Needa is great. He probably could have passed the buck to some underling and sent them to apologize to Vader, but he accepts full responsibility and goes in person, and I kinda think he knows what's likely gonna happen to him. Good on you, Needa. Of course I love the X-Wing scene. Everyone loves the X-Wing scene. Yoda tells Luke he must unlearn what he has learned. Growing up, we wind up developing all these preconceived notions of what is and isn't possible. We make assumptions about the world around us or people we've never even met. We have to be open to changing any of our false beliefs to match the truth, but it's not easy. Luke has doubts that he can move the X-Wing, and a Clone Wars quote says, "Sometimes even the smallest doubt can shake the greatest belief." Yoda, of course, proves him very wrong and tells him that he fails because he lacked belief. So good. To quote the Clone Wars again, believe in yourself or no one else will. I remember being so haunted by Captain Nita's death as a kid, the look on his face just freaked me out. And Vader killed him right there in a hallway. That's terrifying, but it's also kind of the point. He's showing Piet the consequences of failing him and then warning him not to do it again. Cloud City is a really cool and unique location. I love that it's based on concept art from A New Hope, and it was going to be the Imperial capital called Alderaan, and Star Wars just never lets unused concepts go to waste. Billy D. Williams is wonderful as Lando. I love his introduction with the fake fight and then turning on all the charm. It works, but it's also a good signal to the audience that all is not as it seems. But then we all forget because he says, "Hello, what have we here?" and we all melt. Yes, all of us. E3PO is a gem. The fact that C3PO can't catch a break even from other droids is hilarious. It's cool that Obi-Wan's ghost looks more solid than it did at the start of the film, like the power of the Force on Dagobah makes his presence stronger, or maybe his skills are growing. I don't think Lucas or Kirshner were really going for that in this scene, but it's neat to think about. I like that Luke just pulls a snake out of his X-Wing engine. Those dang things are everywhere. The way Obi-Wan disappears through the lighting as Luke's X-Wing takes off is sick. The lighting of that entire scene is really cool. The Ugnaughts playing keep away with Chewie is classic, but I always laugh at the one Ugnaught that throws a basket at Chewie out of spite. I love good ol' Han shoots first solo when Vader is revealed behind that door. No questions, no hesitation, he just starts blasting. Obviously, we're supposed to be mad at Lando at this point, but at least he has the courage to raise his voice to Darth freaking Vader. We know the way Vader's been treating his own people this entire movie, so it's a good way to show the audience that Lando is at least in a tough spot and not actively trying to betray his friends. To jump ahead decades, at Star Wars Celebration 2019, Billy D. Williams made light of the whole thing about how everyone was mad at Lando, and exasperated, he said, "Did anybody die?" And I thought that was hilarious, and my friends and I quote that all the time, especially if we're playing a video game and make a mistake that puts the team in jeopardy. The set design of the carbon freezing chamber is so cool. The orange and blue, the lighting on all the characters is fantastic. Yeah, I love the "I love you, I know" exchange and the fact that it was made up on the day. This shot of Vader coming through the smoke while the Imperial March blares, chills. I am fairly certain I saw this entire scene before I knew what Star Wars was. I can't say for sure, but I have this image of Han and the Carbonite and not really knowing what was happening. I think I was just too young to watch it, but my parents had it on. But the aliens pushing over a block that had a person inside, I think I formed that as some weird core memory when I was like 4 or something. The look Lando gives to Leia and Chewie is great. He made this deal with the Empire that he wasn't happy about, but it was in the name of security and protecting his investment, and yes, his people too. But it's easier to make those kinds of deals when you aren't looking at the people the deals are going to hurt, and seeing exactly how your actions have affected them. And then I love the look Lobot gives to Lando, like, come on dude, how long are we gonna put up with this? I haven't talked about him yet, but I love Lobot. He's probably my Biggs Darklighter for this movie. A lot of that comes from the Lando comic by Charles Soule, which really made me fall in love with the character, but I always thought he was a mysterious and cool design. Boba Fett actor Jeremy Bulloch playing Imperial Officer Lieutenant Shekel is one of my favorite pieces of Star Wars trivia. Everyone always credits Akbar with yelling, "It's a trap," but Leia yelled it before it was cool. This shot, the silhouettes of Luke and Vader, the cinematography of the early Duel is so good, and the tension leading up to the lightsabers actually clashing is built perfectly. The Slave One is a great ship design. Is it completely impractical? Yes. Would it be the easiest ship to shoot in a dogfight? Also yes. I don't care, it's cool. I always feel bad for the rotoscopers who had to work on Chewbacca's fur for the special edition of this movie when they added more windows and backgrounds to Cloud City. That had to be a nightmare, and I salute your service. Back to the duel, I love how clearly Luke is outclassed. Vader just uses one hand for so much of it, toying with Luke, basically having fun, providing commentary while Luke is fighting for his life. But it's great to see him get a couple little victories, hitting Vader with the hose and then knocking him down to the basement. But then it just gets worse as Vader starts to open up with more of his power, like, come on kid, I wasn't even using the Force yet, and you think you can beat me? Poor R2 has been back with 3PO for 5 minutes, and already he's getting bad advice that gets him electrocuted. I love those two together, and his little bump into the wall always makes me laugh. I gotta talk about Wilro Hood. He was the very first video I ever put on my channel because I think he represents so much of what makes Star Wars and the Star Wars fandom great. Just an extra, running through a scene, and then the prop master shoved an ice cream maker in his hands, but people watched these movies so many times that he became a weird obsession. The ice cream maker man. And then people started to cosplay as him, and then his notoriety got him written into stories. It's amazing, and I love it, and I look forward to the running of the hoods at every convention. I love that when Darth Vader comes out swinging from his hiding place, he's breathing hard because he was holding his breath. That's a great detail. He's relentless, but still basically toying with Luke, but then the second the kid gets an actual hit on him, he's just like, nope, this is over, and he cuts his hand off, which is another core memory I have. That's something that will stick with you. I don't remember knowing Vader was Luke's father. I don't have solid memories of watching Star Wars until I was 7 or 8, and I sat down with intention to watch A New Hope. But I do remember Han and Carbonite, and Luke losing his hand, and then I remember seeing the Duel of the Nile, and at the end of that movie, a crocodile bites off someone's hand. I remember having nightmares about people losing their hands when I was young. Of course, I love the I am your father reveal. It's powerful and the worst thing Luke or the audience could possibly hear, but now I love that it illustrates the flexibility necessary in storytelling. People love to harp on cinematic universes having plans a lot these days, and I don't think plans are bad at all, but it's not the only way to tell a story. Vader being Luke's father was not planned, but then it came to be while they were workshopping the story of the second movie, and it's great, and I'm so glad Lucas didn't stubbornly stick with what he had, quote, planned. Chewie and Leia's look at Lando when the hyperdrive fails again is very funny, but Leia's facepalm is everything. I feel that way every single day, Leia. I love the look Piet gives when the Falcon eventually escapes, like, I am so getting force choked for this. I think the implication was going to be that he would die for his failure, but I'm glad he came back for Return of the Jedi. And I guess this is just the point of the movie where I talk about people reacting to things, but Vader's slow double take after the Falcon disappears is perfect. And what about this officer just staring at his tablet as hard as he possibly can, like, don't make eye contact, just pretend you're working, until Vader passes by. I love him. I think it's pretty awesome that the establishing shots of the final scene were added after the film made its theatrical debut. It had made a limited release in 100 theaters, but Lucas felt they didn't properly show that Lando and Chewie were on the Falcon instead of the medical frigate, so they added some effects shots to better explain the geography. I can't even imagine the angry YouTube videos that would be made if that happened today. The final scene is great. It is the polar opposite of the end of A New Hope, a big celebration for a big victory. No, now some of our heroes are gone, and those that remain are consoling each other after a big loss. But it's still hopeful and looking off into the future. There's no despair, there is resolve. And that's everything I love about The Empire Strikes Back. Honestly, it's probably not everything, but that's still a long list. I could keep watching these movies forever, and I'd probably still pick out new things to appreciate every single time. Let me know your favorite moments, both big and small, in the comments. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram, and consider checking out our Patreon page. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.